Okay, so we are setting up for another panel discussion here on the stage titled Third-Party Domino Effect, Governance in an Interdependent Supply Chain. So when businesses rely on dozens or hundreds of partners, a single vendor failure can set off a domino effect that impacts the entire ecosystem. So this session examines how effective governance keeps that chain from collapsing and why strong oversight is now as critical as technical controls. And our panel is going to talk about all of that and so much more. So please join me in welcoming to the stage Ben Trowbridge, who will be our moderator for this panel.
Well, good afternoon, everyone. I want to introduce the rest of this panel. First one up is Matthew Burroughs. He's the CISO for Novolex, which is a very large global pharmaceutical company. And the next is Almanea. He's the Chief Advisory Services Officer for Sirar, ISTC. And next is Professor Fatemah Alharbi, Assistant Professor, Cybersecurity Researcher, and Consultant. Well, I have to say this is really interesting to have this kind of panel up here today. We've got a representation of a very large global CISO on the panel. We've got a Saudi homegrown service provider, tier 1 provider, which is, I know, something that's very new for the kingdom, and one of the top academics in the world today in cybersecurity, that again, homegrown here in Saudi Arabia. So it's really interesting to have this panel and hear your attention here on the last day of a 3-day session is really great. We're going to talk today about the domino effect, you may, in supply chain and invisibility, and the interconnected nature of the world we have today, where a single change of a butterfly, if you may, in our world of the supply chain can occur, and you have a domino effect that perhaps we didn't expect. And I think this is a really interesting group to give different perspectives on the same question. So our first question is, third-party dependencies are growing faster. How do you quantify concentration risk? What metrics help you convince leadership? And what's really important when it comes to business exposure? So, Abdullah, you want to take that first one?
Yeah, absolutely. The risk concentration, I think, fundamentally is an operational fragility kind of issue. A lot of organizations would look at the concentration, the vendor assessment in silos, and they tackle it as if it's a procurement issue. So they will be assessing vendor by vendor rather than looking at the holistic view. And I think this is one of the biggest challenges when it comes to concentration of risk. And of course, there are some metrics that you can use to identify if you have this sort of concentration. An example of that would be a dependency ratio index, for example. And a good example of this is looking at your organization data. And let's say you have the client data transactions are passing, 40% of them, for example, are passing through one payment gateway. So that by itself can indicate that there is a concentration of risk on that payment gateway, since it's handling 40% of the client traffic. Another example of this would be the integration gravity index. And by that I mean looking at what systems are integrating to that major system that you have. It could be an API integration, or it could be a system-to-system communication of some sort. And the number of systems that are integrated can tell you that there is a concentration of risk. And that's what we mean by having a little bit of a holistic view rather than looking at it in small chunks. And the last element to share is more around the revenue index. So it could be a component that is not truly transacting a lot of traffic, but having that system down could impact, for example, 22% of your revenue. And that can be another indication of the concentration of risk. So the bottom line is, don't look at the systems individually, rather look at it from a holistic business view that can indicate if you have any blind spots, I would say.
Fatemah, you have any thoughts on that?
No, good. I
Okay,
really
okay.
like the idea that he brought up about the integration, because I believe this is one of the major things that we're working on here in the industry.
Okay, interesting. Matt, you want to jump in on that?
Yeah, I definitely agree on the API integration component of it. If you're just giving out APIs just because the vendor wants to get access into your systems, and you're not understanding the level of permissions that you're giving out, then you're setting yourself up for risks that you can't really appreciate until something goes bad. So I definitely agree.
Okay, interesting. Talking about third-party dependencies, and they're certainly everywhere in the supply chain and in our everything that affects our business today. And the dependencies are growing faster than internal controls. What is the biggest supply chain blind spot, if you may, that we have today? Matt?
Yeah, so it's a great question, Ben. So in my industry, I work in manufacturing, and the biggest blind spot for me would be who has access into our systems. So remote access plays the biggest blind spot when we don't know who's trying to connect into our systems. That's not having transparency as we're looking to segment our different environments. So we have the IT side of the house, and you have OT side, and we have these E-lines, which are bridges between the two systems. So when there's remote access, the biggest concern is, why do they need access to our systems in the first place?
Right. Abdullah, you got any thoughts on that?
Yeah, I mean, I would add to that too, is that it's not only the third-party dependency. Now, some are defining it to be the fourth-party dependency. Some of those vendors and companies you're working with, you would look at it as a third party, but there is also another dependency behind these vendors sometimes, and we've seen it. We've seen it in some attacks where something would happen to the value chain or the supply chain because of that vendor depends on another vendor that you didn't know about. And this is even growing exponentially. It's not only a third-party risk. Sometimes it goes deeper level than what you can handle as well.
From an academics and academia, how do you see that, Fatemah?
So talking about the hidden dependency, I believe most of the executives, they look at their top suppliers. They don't look at the hidden dependencies. And this is where most of the concerns and risks are coming from. And we see so many cyber breaches are actually coming from these hidden dependencies. So I believe executives should look at the whole map of the dependencies, not only the top suppliers.
But you're kind of building on that. The supply chain, from your view, probably looks very different because you have a chance to, it's a different tempo, if you may. It's not the operational day-to-day. What are the unique risks you see in education and research systems, and how can enterprise learn from what you're seeing today?
Absolutely. So academia and research have different tastes of supply chain, and this opens a huge space for risks and challenges that we normally face as academics that normally don't so many people talking about. One of the first challenges that we face as academics is the data. Without data, we cannot do any research. So we as researchers normally go to and taking the path on one of three options. We either go and talk to companies and organizations, we try to convince them, and sometimes begging them to provide us with the data. This is one. Number two, if we couldn't succeed with the first option, we go and implement and develop our own tool, our own framework, trying to crawl or extract or even sometimes generate the data that would help us in the research. The third option is that we just go and use publicly available data sets. So obviously the first option is not very feasible. It's not easy to do it. It's not easy to convince the companies. And even if they say, okay, we will provide you with the data, it's okay, and you can do the research, sometimes they say, Well, we need to enforce some policies, some regulations on the publication. You can publish this, you cannot publish that. And we as researchers honestly find it a very big constraint, and so we try to avoid that. So we go with the second option if we have the good time, if we have people, manpower that are well trained, they are experienced. But again, it's time consuming. So most of the people, they go with the third option, which is about just use publicly available data sets. But this opens another layer of risks, another layer of its challenge, because normally these data sets are maintained by small groups and small teams. So any small cyber breach or any malicious update will affect not only the researchers who are updating these data sets, but all the people and all the labs and all the institutes that are using these data sets. Another challenge is the publicly available. They heavily rely on the publicly available tools and libraries. Again, we are facing the same thing. I know that we are researchers. We try to document everything on papers and on README or GitHub or on any other portal, but we need the same from the business. Same as academics that we are documenting these things, we also try to push this forward by the industry and people who are generating these codes and these tools, and to make them also available and to use them as they more authentic compared to publicly available codes. Another key challenge that I would like maybe to conclude this point with is the gap that we have between the industry and the academia. I'm trying to be an advocate for this, because we as academics and we as researchers, we are really struggling with that. We try to bridge this gap between academia and research. Please help us, give us the data, try to have faith on the things that we are doing. That's why maybe the vision here in Saudi Arabia, Vision 2030, we are trying to promote the idea of opening R&D departments in every single company, especially the big ones, because we really understand the power of research.
Abdullah?
Yeah, if I may add to that, and I'm not sure if it applies to all type of research. I'm not an academic by any chance. But I'm seeing this practice, especially in the AI space, where they started to synthesize some data. And you can rely on a small set of data, and you try to generate different variances out of this, rather than having an access to a large pool of data. And apparently, this can help even the model to work, even if you don't have a big set of data. And that could be a workaround, at least to some of the LLMs and the AI. And it could be even applicable for some other field of research. But I definitely agree. A lot of organization sits on a large pile of data where academic can make sense of it and can generate even more useful insights and use cases that maybe we never thought of.
So Matt, to kind of build on that, from your view as a CISO, okay, you've got these different views here. What would you like to see most out of, what could academia provide you in with this problem, kind of another dimension to it?
Theory-based use cases that can be used to explain how the concepts that we're thinking about can actually be achieved in the real world.
Okay.
That will be helpful.
Okay, that's great. Abdul, what's the one supply chain scenario that when you, as a service provider, what's the one supply chain scenario that you don't see rehearsed enough, or you wish would be rehearsed enough in your clients and in the industry?
Right. I mean, I'm sure there are a few to name, but I would say looking at the holistic view beyond the vendor or technology per se, and most probably is around the cloud offering, the DNS offering. A lot of organizations, when they do the third-party risk assessment, they were looking at the technology itself and how can I handle that if something goes wrong. But those technologies, especially with the adoption of cloud, a lot of them are being deployed on a cloud level, and that portion is not properly assessed if there are many vendors relying on it. And if you recall, we've had the AWS incident recently, sure, the East part, and so many applications went down that you could have never thought of. And there was no dependency between the applications themselves, other than that they share a cloud infrastructure or a DNS infrastructure. And if I look back to some of the organizations and what sort of third-party risk assessment they have done, most of them, they only focus on the technology itself, and if something goes wrong to it, what can I do? But not the underlying foundation of it. And if something like this as a catastrophe happened, do I have another cloud provider that I can lean on, or another DNS provider? I think this is one of the biggest spots in third-party, blind spot in third-party risk, in addition to going beyond looking at the technology alone and who are the suppliers of those vendors, which is the fourth and fifth. And if that's impacting the overall technology that you have, and what is your backup solutions to this and the drills that you want to activate in order to overcome it.
Fatemah, any thoughts on that?
So I just want to confirm, did you talk about the DNS thing?
The DNS.
Yeah, so I have been working on DNS since 2014. So I have done so many attacks on it that have been published in prestigious conferences such as the Usenix and CCS, which are considered one of the big four conferences in the area. So I totally understand how a small breach or a small issue in the DNS can affect the whole ecosystem. Because DNS obviously is not designed, taking security into consideration with the design. So many things are still, and so many issues are happening on the DNS. So I do believe that we really need to also understand the hidden dependencies in the DNS infrastructure. I totally agree, yeah.
Matt, any more thoughts on that?
Yeah, so what we've tried to do is align our organization to our business goals. And what I mean by that, so July 19th of 2024, CrowdStrike happened. And a lot of organizations weren't prepared for being resilient enough to run their business without the internet. One thing that we test on an annual basis is, how can the business operate without the internet? In manufacturing, some of our equipment's 100 years old, and it doesn't have the internet. So we're able to say, we can make product, we can continue to operate for up to 3 days, even though the internet goes down, and we're confident in our ability to test it out. So I think that a lot of organizations don't know how to ensure that they're resilient enough to go through and understand if a third party is impacting them. For if it's CrowdStrike, if we talk about AWS US East 2 that happened a couple weeks ago,
right.
If we talk around Cloudflare that happened 2 or 3 weeks ago, like all these things can impact us, but they shouldn't be able to cripple us, so we just need to be prepared for them.
Interesting, very interesting. So a little bit of a change. When every vendor claims to be secure, how do you actually validate that they're secure beyond questionnaires and maybe pretty sometimes costly third-party verification? Matt, you want to say?
It's a great question, and I don't believe you actually can.
Okay.
You can't actually say someone's actually secure, because everybody is secure until they're not, right? So I can say my organization's secure as possible, but if we get breached, we're compromised. The confidentiality of everything I've said just went out the window. So in my opinion, you're only as good as your last day, and your last day is the day.
Yeah. But your thoughts as a service provider?
Yeah, I mean, I tend to agree. It's very difficult to validate this, although we do it.
Okay.
So for example, some large organizations, Saudi Arabia, Saudi Aramco, STC, and I'm sure many others, they established a third-party risk assessment program. And they do not accept any vendor unless you do some security checks on them.
Got it.
Be it vulnerability scanning in some cases, what are the security practices, and some even go beyond this to do a physical visit to validate what do they do. But again, this, as Matt said, this is very costly. Not every organization can do this. And even if you do this, they don't do it for every client. They have classifications, so how critical this vendor is, then they want to go the extra mile to validate. But when you come back to it, it's just a snapshot. Is this continuous? Of course, contractually, you can have those clauses that can give you the ability to do an audit check or security check whenever there is a situation, but it's not a continuous monitoring of the health check and security. So you have to do with the best that you have, right? It could be a validation of some evidence collection, some site visits if you can afford it, and maybe looking at the historical attacks that has happened to that vendor or provider, and you want to make your assessment on that. And maybe on a regular basis, every year or two, then maybe you can do some sort of an assessment. But again, can you be 100% sure? Definitely not. I don't think so.
Is there any leading thoughts from academia on how to look at the problem? I know it's a tough question.
So this is one of the good things about academia. So I know that we have mentioned this so many times that we cannot say that a system is secure or a network is secure until we prove otherwise. And this is the power, where the power of academia comes from. That's why we try to find vulnerabilities wherever we can on all the systems that we test. And we have proven this in so many papers that we have published. So yeah.
Thank you. Thank you for that. So with that, where do you see the biggest opportunity for innovation? This is a costly process at the end of the day. Trying to maintain visibility just is because it takes labor, it takes IT resources, it really is a tremendous amount of energy. What's the biggest innovation opportunity on your wish list you've made as a service provider? Either tooling, processes, data sharing, what's on your wish list there?
Yeah, honestly, Ben, when I saw that some companies, the large one at least, are doing this kind of assessment to the third party, I wish there could be a platform where every organization can learn from the results of that third party risk rather than doing it over and over again. So you would have 2 or 3 organizations probably dealing with the same provider. Instead of doing that assessment 3 times, then I can rely on the data that has been done by the first contractor, and that could save us a lot of time and money. And you can divide even those vendors, so that will enable you to do even further than the normal validation, as long as you have this platform with trusted parties, of course, where they can see certain results of the third-party assessment risk that has been done. And it could be also cross-country, cross-continent as well. So we're dealing with international players that I'm sure majority of organizations are making use of. And once we have this kind of validation, a site visit, for example, validation about the access of this facility and how often do they review the logs and what you have seen there as an auditor can save a lot of money and even bring great value to those organizations. I think that could be a great innovation that we can have for the ecosystem as a whole.
Thank you. Research and academia has a great opportunity to look at these problems. Anything on your wish list that you'd like to see?
We always try to promote and be advocate for the idea of zero trust approach. We know that the zero approach is very essential, and because most of the organizations, they don't really know what are the hidden dependencies, what are the third parties that they do really do the work, and the third parties that they depend on, or what are the hidden dependencies such as the cloud services, the DNS providers, the authentication systems, even the automated penetration libraries that they are using. They are not normally on the top of their vendor list. They just care about their top vendors and top suppliers. They don't ask about these hidden dependencies, these third libraries. In one of my DNS research project, because I'm here as an academic, so allow me to go back to my research a little bit, I have proven that even a single and very tiny DNS issue can compromise the whole system. And we have tested this on millions of DNS providers, DNS resolvers, even DNS providers on the cloud. And this is because the organizations, they do believe that these systems are by default secured, which is not. So that's because supply chain is now more linear. It is more like a layered architecture. It's a shared infrastructure, and also it is interconnected. So the concept that we try to advocate always and always talk about it, verify everything, but trust nothing.
There you go. Very interesting. Matt, any thoughts on that?
I think they've already summarized. If I could have a way to, if I could do validation tests physically, where I can go on site and actually pinpoint, are you actually doing what you're saying you're doing? If I had the money to do it, the time to do it, and I could do it for all of my suppliers, fantastic. But if we could have a platform that would continuously monitor and show me, hey, here's where our vendors are, here's what they're doing, they have open gaps, here's the open vulnerabilities, and we could actually hold people accountable, right? Accountability is key. If we could hold people to a standard universally, I think we'll be in a better spot. But if there's no accountability and it changes per region, it's always going to be diluted.
Thanks for that. So let's go back to zero trust, which I think is a part of this, at least from a network perspective. But how is it essential for managing third-party assets, especially with the invisible dependencies in today's digital supply chain? Fatemah?
So if you allow me also to talk about the thing that we always use, which is AI. I think the technology now we are relying on is AI. And using AI is essential, but using it responsibly is even more essential. We can say that most organizations now, they are using it. There is a statistics, if I recall, by McKinsey, saying that 78% of organizations back in the first half of 2025, they say that they are using already AI. And when we think about supply chain today, many decisions have been drawn using AI, which is make it a little bit critical if we are using it just not ethically or not responsibly. We are using AI to draw decisions based on vendor evaluation, based on logistics, based on fraud detection, even cybersecurity monitoring. And a recent study by researchers from Stanford, and it's the 8th since it's begun, it shows that the problem itself is with the AI model itself. We need to, because it's not explainable, it's not transparent, it's not governed, and it's not secured. So basically, it's not ethical, and it's not responsible, if we can say that. However, if we use AI responsibly, we can say that this would improve the thing that we are talking about is the zero trust. It would provide transparency. It will provide diversity and, more importantly, the security. So we really need to use it ethically, and we need to use it responsibly. We need to have, okay, if you want to use the AI, you need to look at the pillars. You need to talk about, say, the regulations and all of that.
Great. Matt?
No, I agree with Fatemah. I think if we're able to be responsible with AI, right? We talked about accountability, now we talk about responsibility. I sound like I'm a parent lecturing the children. But if we use AI responsibly and we tailor it to give us an outcome that shows us the value, I totally agree with Fatemah.
Abdullah?
Yeah, I mean, looking at AI, something that we've just launched in this conference is a solution to do AI security, AI authenticity, lack of hallucination, and evaluation and data accuracy, because we understand that dependency on AI is only growing bigger and bigger. And to adopt AI responsibly, then you have to have that trust into the AI engine. And this is one of the gaps that we're trying to solve is, would the AI hallucinate in case you use it in critical decision-making situations? Or who should have access to the AI and for what uses as well? And can I do AI poisoning to the data within? So this is one of the things that we're also exploring, and we just launched something just to tackle this address. And I think definitely it is one of the third-party risks that we have to all be taking care of.
There is one thing I would just like to add is about what do we mean by responsible AI, because this is a question that always comes to the CISOs if we want to use AI securely. So there are two things. We either secure the AI or we use the AI to secure our systems. And we are using, now we are shifting to the first one, is that we are trying to secure the LLM, the large language models. And what we mean by responsible AI is that we know what the AI models are coming from. We know what kind of data are trained, what kind of data are tested, and also the decisions which are drawn and concluded and outputted from the AI. We understand how these decisions are made and how these decisions are concluded.
Very insightful. We are looking at our clock saying we're officially out of time. So we're going to call this a day. I do want to close just one thought from each of you, if we could. 3-4 words max. What's the most underestimated third-party risk in 2026? Matt? I'll go down the line.
How many words? How many words? 4?
Five
words?
5.
AI, confidentiality, governance, responsibility.
Hidden dependencies.
Yeah, interdependencies. There we go.
Interdependencies, okay, big words. Abdullah?
I don't know if I can say it in 5 words, but I would say don't look at the third party in isolation, look at the whole ecosystem.
Whole picture, yeah. Great. And
I have already teased Matt with it. So we really, if there is one action that I would really love the executives to look at, is to map their dependencies. Look at the invisible ones, because this is where most of the risks and most of the challenges are coming from.
Great. Well, I want to thank the panel for their thoughts today. It's been a great session. And thanks for the out-of-town guests who've flown so far and others who came from across town. It's great to have you here today. Thank you much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Shukran. Thank you.